what did Moses ask God to do if he wouldn't forgive Israel their sin? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Exodus on Walking Through the Bible.
Glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, please turn to Exodus chapter 32. We're going to be reading from verses 30 to 35. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Exodus 32, beginning at verse 30. Now it came to pass in the next day that Moses said to the people, "You have committed a great sin. So now I will go up to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin." Then Moses returned to the Lord and said, "Oh, these people have committed a great sin and have made for themselves a god of gold. Yet now if you will forgive their sin, but if not, I pray blot me out of your book which you have written." And the Lord said to Moses, "Whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. Now therefore go, lead the people to the place of which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit for punishment, I will visit punishment upon them for their sin." So the Lord plagued the people because of what they did with the calf which Aaron made. In this chapter we have Israel at Mount Sinai worshiping the golden calf. This in spite of instructions in chapter 20 that they were not to worship idols, and they weren't even to worship the true God of heaven with images. The reason they built the idol was because Moses spent so much time on Mount Sinai that they didn't know what had become of him. While this reason might have been true, it was no excuse for disobeying God. They could have inquired of Aaron, who could have told them to be patient, for Moses would descend from Mount Sinai when he was done communing with the Lord. Seeing as how Moses went up Mount Sinai by the word of the Lord, it would thus be expected that an all-powerful God like Jehovah would be able to protect him and then send him back to tell Israel what he had said. But no, the children of Israel became impatient and built the idol. The worship of this idol was not only wrong, but it also included lascivious dancing, something else that was sinful. When Moses came down the mountain, he saw what Israel had done and became angry. He was so angry that he broke the tablets of stone that the Lord had written on. He asked Aaron what happened, and instead of accepting responsibility, Aaron blamed the people and indirectly blamed God when he said that the idol simply appeared from the fire. Moses knew that the idol was an abomination to God, and so he didn't need to ask God what to do. He ground the idol up into powder, placed the powder in Israel's drinking water, and forced them to drink it. He then called out to Israel, commanding that all who were on the Lord's side were to come to him. Only the Levites came. Moses then instructed the Levites to go throughout the camp and kill his brother, companion, and neighbor. We discussed this as meaning those who led Israel off into sin. About 3,000 men died that day by the sword. Coming now to verse 30, we find that it is now the next day. Moses told the people that they had sinned a great sin. Does this mean that the sin of idolatry carried with it a greater punishment in hell than other sins? No, but if we are serving idols, we cannot receive forgiveness from Jehovah, for he will not forgive those who also serve idols. In that sense, this is a great sin, for we have no chance of forgiveness unless we give up our idolatry. Moses then told Israel that he would go up and speak with the Lord, that perhaps Moses could get God to forgive them of their sin. When Moses approached God, he approached him in humility, as though he was the one who sinned, even though he did not. He pleaded that God would forgive them, but if he wouldn't, he prayed that God would blot his name out of the book that he had written instead of Israel. What is this book that was referred to? Well, it could be, as some say, the book of the living. In that case, Moses would be asking God to physically kill him instead of the people. But that is not the only possibility, for God has another book that he is keeping, the book of life, containing the names of the righteous. We find that book in the book of Revelation, Revelation 20, verse 12. By God's answer to Moses, it appears that this is the book that Moses is referring to. In this case, Moses would be asking God to allow him to be eternally punished for the sins of the people. Mankind, because all have sinned, cannot pay for one another's sins and remove them. That's why we needed a sinless Savior, Jesus, to do what we couldn't do. God rejected Moses' request, saying that the innocent wouldn't be eternally punished for the guilty. Those who were guilty would be punished. That agrees with Ezekiel 18, verse 20, which says that the soul that sins shall die. Moses wasn't the one who sinned in this matter, so he wouldn't be charged with sin as though he was guilty. Only those who were guilty would be charged with sin. This is yet another verse that shows us the falsehoods of Calvinism. We do not inherit, nor are we held responsible for the sins of somebody else. We are only held responsible for our own sins. The doctrine of total depravity is false doctrine and should not be believed by followers of God. God, however, true to his word early on in this chapter, did not destroy Israel for their sin, nor did he remove their ability to go to the promised land, for Moses would lead them there. God's angel, which again in this context meant God himself, would go before Moses to lead them. However, even though he would allow them to travel to the promised land despite their sin, God's patience with Israel had run out concerning sin. He would not allow them to do such a thing in the future and not receive total punishment. Hence why when we get to the book of Numbers and they rebel and do not enter the promised land, that God punishes them with 40 years of wandering in the wilderness until the rebels die out. God never forgot what they did here at Sinai, even though he was merciful to them in not wiping them out. He did, however, plague them because of their sin. Whether this was in addition to what Moses did, we cannot know, but suffice it to say, the Lord did punish them. With that, our time is up for today. Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Exodus chapter 33, verses 1 to 6, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.